Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. The moment Kane Ashby's hand connected with Phyllis Summers' face, Genoa City set in collaborative unbelief, the sharp sound of the poke echoing through the room like a projectile that gestured the end of everything Phyllis allowed. She controlled. This was a private battle behind unrestricted doors, not one of their rumored arguments fueled by secrets and desire. It was public, brutal, and ruinous. The crowd gathered at the Chancellor Winter's fate heaved in horror as Phyllis staggered back, her impertinence flaming red, her eyes wide not with wrathfulness, but with terror. Because Kane hadn't slighted her out of rage alone. He'd slighted her because the verity, her deadliest taradiddle, had eventually come out, and there was no stopping the fallout now. For weeks, rumors had swirled through Genoa City about Phyllis's unforeseen influence, her uncanny capability to stay three-way ahead of Victor Newman, her mysterious access to information that could trip conglomerates. Kane had defended her relentlessly, averring that Phyllis was being targeted because she was brilliant, because she hovered important men. But indeed Kane, the man who had risked everything for her, hadn't known the full extent of what she'd done. Until now. Until the evidence was placed directly in his hands, documents, recordings, timestamps, that revealed a treason so advised, so cruel, it made every other reproach in Phyllis's past look like child's play. The verity was worse than anyone imagined. Phyllis hadn't just manipulated issues, she had orchestrated them. She had falsified substantiation that transferred an innocent man to captivity, altered medical records to shift a maternity test, and blurted information anonymously that destroyed reports while keeping her own hands clean. But the most insupportable part, the taradiddle that destroyed her ever, was that she had used Kane himself as a pawn, letting him believe they were mates in a righteous fight while intimately framing him as her eventual fall Joe if effects went wrong. Kane discovered that Phyllis had prepared a digital trail designed to point directly at him, icing her survival at the cost of his freedom. When Kane brazened her confidentially at the fete, Phyllis laughed it off at first, assuming this was just another fight she could talk her way out of. She reached for him, rumored that they were untouchable together. That was when Kane pulled out his phone and played the recording, Phyllis's voice, cold and precise, outlining exactly how Kane would take the fall if Victor redressed. The color drained from her face. In that moment, Phyllis knew she had eventually misestimated. The poke followed, not as an act of violence alone, but as the final punctuation mark on their alliance. Kane turned her deception into a public reckoning, dragging her onto the stage as stupefied guests looked on. "This is who she really is," Kane blazoned, his voice shaking with fury and heartache. "Not a victim. Not a survivor. A fabricator who burns everyone she touches." Gasps gurgled through the crowd as Kane exposed everything, projecting substantiation onto the massive screen behind them. Emails, voice recordings, fiscal transfers. Names of people she had destroyed flashed one by one. Phyllis tried to intrude, to spin, to cry, but the room had formally turned against her. The poke had been shocking, but the verity was annihilating. Jack Abbott watched in stupefied silence, his face etched with remorse as he realized how deeply Phyllis had manipulated him yet again. Billy gripped his fists, rage and guilt colliding as he flashed back every time he defended her. Indeed Victor Newman, a man who admired ruthless strategy, looked unsettled, not impressed, but disturbed. Because Phyllis had crossed a line indeed he wouldn't. She hadn't just played the game. She had outfitted it, rewriting reality to suit her requirements, leaving wreckage in her wake. As security closed in, Phyllis eventually broke. The confident boo dissolved, replaced by raw fear. She screamed that Kane was lying, that he was jealous, that this was vengeance for Lily. But no bone believed her. The substantiation was inarguable. Social media exploded within twinkles, vids of the poke and Kane's disclosure going viral, captions screaming her downfall across every screen in Genoa City. Public humiliation. Phyllis exposed. Club ends her. The court of public opinion moved fleetly and mercilessly. Lily Winters arrived just in time to witness Phyllis's collapse, her expression a blend of exculpation and anguish. She didn't smile. She didn't bewail. She simply looked at Kane and jounced, quietly admitting the insolvable choice he'd made. By exposing Phyllis, Kane had also exposed himself, his poor judgment, his emotional weakness, his conspiracy. But unlike Phyllis, Kane wasn't running. He was ready to face the consequences. That alone shifted the narrative. Kane wasn't the villain tonight. Phyllis was. As Phyllis was attended out, she locked eyes with Kane one last time. There was no abomination there, only unbelief. She had always believed she was smarter than everyone differently. That she could control every outgrowth. But she had undervalued one thing the moment when love curdles into clarity. Kane didn't poke her because he abominated her. He slighted her because in that moment, he eventually saw her easily, and the verity was unsupportable. In the days that followed, the fallout was absolute. Phyllis was fired, ostracized, and cut off financially as accounts were firmed pending disquisition. Abettors dissolved overnight. Doors closed. Indeed, her own children plotted to attune the woman they loved with the monster exposed on that stage. Genoa City didn't just turn its reverse on Phyllis, it cancelled her. Assignations stopped coming. Calls went unanswered. The woman who formerly thrived on chaos was left alone with it. Kane, meanwhile, faced his own reckoning. Lily demanded honesty, not defenses. Victor advised him that adversaries no way truly vanish. But for the first time in a long time, Kane slept without falsehoods hanging him. He'd lost Phyllis, lost his character, but recaptured his soul. And in Genoa City, that might be the rarest palm of all. As for Phyllis Summers, the question was no longer how she'd escape this reproach but whether she could survive it. Her world had collapsed in a single, unrecoverable moment. One poke. One secret. One verity she could no way spin down. This wasn't just another reproach. This was the end of the Phyllis everyone knew. And as Genoa City moved on without her, one thing was clear: some falsehoods don't just destroy reports. They destroy lives ever. Phyllis Summers had survived dishonors ahead. Affairs. Lies. Backstabbings. Public demotions that would have ended anyone differently. She had always clawed her way back with a boo, a scheme, and an impeccably timed counterattack. But this time was different. This time, the silence that followed her exposure was louder than any laugh Genoa City had ever hurled at her. The phones didn't ring. The abettors didn't show up. And for the first time in her life, Phyllis realized she wasn't fighting an adversary, she was fighting erasure. The morning after the fate, Phyllis sat alone in her darkened extension, watching the news renewal the poke on an endless circle. Kane's hand. Her shock. The crowd's rustle. Every angle, every slow stir renewal stripping her down piece by piece. Observers didn't debate whether she was shamefaced presently, they batted how long she had been dangerous. Master manipulator. Sociopath. Genoa City's most destructive force. Words that dug deeper than any physical blow. This wasn't reproach content. This was a posthumous. She turned the television off and goggled at her reflection in the black screen. The red mark on her impertinence was gone, but the damage wasn't. Kane hadn't just exposed her taradiddle, he had exposed her playbook. And in Genoa City, once people saw how you operated, you were finished. Fear was her currency. Query her guard. Now everyone knew exactly who she was and how far she'd go. The first knock came before noon. It was Aunt Jack. It was Aunt Billy. It was Aunt Indeed Security. It was a process garçon. Suits. Examinations. Processes piled like headstones. Phyllis inked nothing, slammed the door, and slid down against it, breathing hard. She had anticipated counter-reaction. She had anticipated a coordinated takedown. Someone had mustered Genoa City against her late. And she knew exactly who. Victor Newman. Victor didn't need to lift a cutlet intimately. Kane had done the dirty work for him. All Victor had to do now was finish the prosecution still. Banks set accounts. Former associates suddenly flashed back effects. People Phyllis had buried times ago set up their voices. This was vengeance. This was decimation. Across city, Kane Ashby stood in Lily's living room, bracing himself as she read the captions in silence. He anticipated wrathfulness. Commination. A poke of her own. What he didn't anticipate was the look of prostration in her eyes. You didn't just end her, Lily eventually said. You started commodity you can't control. Kane swallowed hard. She was going to destroy everything. Everyone. I know, Lily replied. But Phyllis doesn't collapse still. She retaliates. Lily stepped closer, lowering her voice. And when she does, she won't come for Victor. She won't come for me. She'll come for you. That warning echoed in Kane's mind hours laterally when he entered the anonymous textbook "Check your dispatch." You missed commodity. What Kane set up made his blood run cold. Wave. A digital dead man switch. Lines listed to release if anything happened to Phyllis. Not indicting substantiation against Victor but against Kane himself. Altered documents. Fabricated fiscal trails. Fake dispatches. An interpretation of events that painted Kane as the mastermind of every illegal move Phyllis had ever made. She had planned for treason. She always did. Kane had just touched off the contingency. Meanwhile, Phyllis was formally on the move. She didn't flee Genoa City. That would look like guilt. Rather, she resurfaced strategically, walking into society during peak lunch hour, daring anyone to meet her eyes. Exchanges stopped. Spoons set skyline. No bone. Approached her. No bone. Defended her. Phyllis smiled anyway. Fear didn't matter presently. Attention did. And she got it. Within hours an anonymous blog went live. The Ashby lines. Not flashy. Not emotional. Cold. Precise. Document after document laying out Kane's crimes. The narrative was clear. Phyllis was reckless, yes, but Kane was the architect. The man behind the curtain. Social media turned on a song. Mistrustfulness crept back by. Had Kane framed her? Had the poke been offered? Had Genoa City been played? Victor read the blog formally and closed his tablet. Intriguing, he murmured. Phyllis wasn't going down without collateral damage. That made her dangerous again. Jack Abbott, torn between fidelity and sense, visited Phyllis that night. He didn't come to charge her. He came to understand her. But what he set up stupefied him further than wrathfulness ever could. Phyllis was calm. Concentrated. Formerly 3-way ahead. They want a monster, she told him. Fine. I'll show them what one really looks like. Jack contended with her to stop. To surrender. To rebuild. Phyllis laughed. There's no reconditioning from this, Jack. There's only survival. She leaned in close. And I always survive. The coming blow landed where it hurt most. Daniel. Her son brazened her, gashes in his eyes, demanding the verity. Phyllis didn't lie. Not this time. She told him everything. The manipulation. The contingencies. The way Kane had nearly been offered. Daniel quailed like she'd struck him. You chose power over people, he said still. Over me. That broke commodity in her. But only for a moment. Pain had no way stopped Phyllis Summers ahead. The real war burned when Kane was summoned for questioning. Suddenly, his heroic exposé looked less noble. Victor watched from the murk as Kane's credibility fractured. Lily defended him intimately, but intimately, mistrustfulness crept by. Phyllis had planted just enough query to bane the well. That was her genius. She didn't need to win. She just demanded everyone differently to lose. And also she faded. No note. No warning. One moment she was spotted entering the Grand Phoenix. The coming, gone. Her phone abandoned. Credit cards untouched. Phyllis Summers dissolved like a ghost, leaving Genoa City suffocating under unanswered questions. Was she running? Planning? Or staying? The answer came weeks laterally. A single package arrived at Victor Newman's office. Inside a flash drive and a note. You tutored me everything. Now let's see who learned better. The train contained commodity indeed Victor had anticipated, substantiation entwining not just Kane, not just Phyllis but Victor himself in a decades-old crime buried so deep it could rewrite Newman history. Phyllis hadn't just planned for treason. She had planned for collective destruction. Victor goggled at the screen, expression undecipherable. For the first time in times, someone had truly overreached him. And that consummation transferred a bite through Genoa City. As Kane stood alone, watching his life unravel piece by piece, one verity came necessary. Sliding Phyllis Summers had ended her. It had unleashed her. And nearly in the murk, Phyllis smiled, knowing the game was over. It had just come deadly. Genoa City didn't realize it was holding its breath until the day Phyllis Summers officially came a ghost. No sightings. No bank exertion. No digital footmark. Not indeed a single anonymous tip. For a woman who formerly thrived on chaos and attention, her exposure was the loudest trouble imaginable. Because silence was no way Phyllis's weakness, it was her warning. Victor Newman was the first to admit the shift. He stood alone in his office long after evening, the flash drive still plugged into his laptop, its contents replaying in his mind like a ticking lemon. Phyllis had transferred evidence of a recent crime. She had reached back decades, digging commodity Victor himself had buried so deeply he'd nearly induced himself it no way was. A lucre. A death ruled accidental. A name that had no way made the papers but should have. This was influence for plutocrat or power. This was influence for obliteration. She's not asking for anything, Victor murmured. That's the problem. Across city, Kane Ashby felt the walls closing in. The disquisition had stalled, not because he was cleared, but because the narrative was too messy. Two prevaricators. Two manipulators. One public poke that now looked less like justice and more like a calculated distraction. Kane watched his reflection in the interrogation room glass and slightly honored the man gaping back. He'd exposed Phyllis, believing Verity would save him. Rather, Verity had come just another armament, one she knew how to twist better than anyone. Lily stood by him, but commodity had shifted. She didn't charge. She didn't misdoubt him openly. But Kane saw it in her eyes during the quiet moments, the implied question: what if Phyllis is right? What if you didn't see everything? That mistrustfulness was Phyllis's topmost palm. The first sign that Phyllis was still in control came without warning. A sealed envelope appeared on Daniel's doorstep. Inside was a single snap, Daniel as a child, holding Phyllis's hand at the domain. On the reverse, 3 words written in red essay. I no way left. Daniel's blood ran cold. He showed it to Jack, who incontinently communicated Victor. The recrimination was clear. Phyllis wasn't running. She was watching. Staying. And she was still close enough to reach the people she loved most, without ever being seen. That night, Genoa City's power grid flitted. For 30 seconds, every screen in the megacity went black. Phones. TVs, billboards. When the power returned, one communication appeared far and wide contemporaneously. The Verity is still coming. No hand. No explanation. Just sweat. Victor ordered a full lockdown of Newman systems. Kane was placed under surveillance, unofficially. Jack doubled security at Jabot. Lily moved her children out of city. Genoa City didn't fear. It braced. Because everyone understood the rules now. Phyllis Summers didn't strike impulsively. She disassembled you piece by piece until you prayed for the final blow. And also she struck where no bone anticipated. The videotape blurted at dawn. Security footage, coarse but unmistakable, showing Kane and Phyllis weeks before the fate, arguing violently in a private office. Kane's voice was raised. His words edited just enough to indicate pitfalls. The clip cut before environment could save him. The caption spread briskly, then Fire Club Ashby's dark side exposed. Kane watched the footage in horror. He knew that argument. Knew what really happened. But Phyllis had weaponized timing, editing, and public memory. Again. This is how she survives, Lily rumored. By making sure no bone knows who to believe. Victor gripped his jaw. She's not surviving presently.